The opening of The Sound of Music remains one of the most iconic sequences in cinematic history, depicting a world of lush greenery and absolute serenity. Yet for those behind the camera, the reality was a stark departure from the polished, ethereal beauty presented on screen. While audiences saw Julie Andrews spinning in the Austrian hills, the production team was grappling with a logistical nightmare that tested the limits of their patience and technical ingenuity. What we perceive as a seamless masterclass in filmmaking was actually the result of persistent, exhausting challenges that threatened to derail the project at every single turn. The sheer effort required to maintain this facade of perfection is a testament to the dedication of the cast and crew, who had to navigate deep creative disagreements, environmental hazards, and a growing sense of skepticism regarding the very nature of the story they were trying to tell. To understand the true legacy of this film, we must look past the music and into the friction that defined its creation. When Julie Andrews first arrived to meet director Robert Wise, she was not the legendary star that the world knows today. She was a relatively untested talent in the film industry, carrying the weight of recent rejections from studio executives who felt she lacked the necessary photogenic qualities for major motion pictures. During their initial discussions, Andrews expressed a profound concern that the film's script felt far too saccharine, almost bordering on the artificial. She questioned how they could possibly transform such a sentimental narrative into something that felt genuinely human and grounded. This was not merely an idle comment. It was a fundamental critique that shaped her approach to the character of Maria. She felt that without a gritty, realistic core, the film risked becoming a hollow musical that would fail to connect with audiences on a meaningful level. Her early hesitations set a tone of critical inquiry that permeated the production, influencing how scenes were blocked, acted, and ultimately captured for posterity. The contractual reality of the production was equally sobering, creating a long-term imbalance that few people were aware of at the time. Julie Andrews signed a deal that provided a fixed salary without any share of the eventual box office profits, a decision that would later become a glaring example of a lopsided Hollywood agreement. While the studio was essentially hedging its bets on an uncertain outcome, Andrews was pouring her entire emotional and physical range into a project that would eventually define her entire career. She did not know that the film would become a global phenomenon, but the lack of foresight in her contract meant she never received the financial rewards commensurate with the film's massive, decades-long success. This creates an interesting narrative layer when we rewatch the film today. We see an artist who is giving everything she has to a project, unaware that the industry is treating her contribution as a finite service rather than a collaborative partnership. Beyond the contract, there was a deep-seated resistance from other members of the cast, particularly Christopher Plummer, whose skepticism was legendary. Plummer viewed the character of Captain Von Trapp as a tired, one-dimensional stereotype, a cold, rigid man whose emotional softening felt far too convenient. He rejected the role multiple times, leading the production to search for other stars like Sean Connery or Richard Burton. When Plummer finally agreed to join, it was only after securing the freedom to reshape the character into something more complex and layered. He demanded a portrayal that possessed a genuine history, including the contradictions and vulnerabilities that a man in the captain's position would naturally carry. This friction between the actors and the initial vision of the script was a constant undercurrent, pushing the director to facilitate a much more nuanced performance than the original source material had arguably allowed or intended. The physical environment of the Salzburg shoot proved to be one of the most significant antagonists during the production. What the script promised, sunny, bright, and idyllic landscapes, was repeatedly undermined by the relentless, unpredictable Austrian weather. Continuous rain turned the set into a quagmire of mud and frustration, leading to massive delays that forced the crew to wait for days under damp tarps. Logistics became a nightmare. Because the terrain was so difficult to navigate after the storms, the production team had to resort to using ox carts to transport heavy camera equipment up the mountain. This slow, archaic method of movement placed immense pressure on the schedule and the morale of everyone involved. It serves as a reminder that the magical quality of the film was built upon a foundation of genuine suffering, as actors often had to maintain their bright, joyous expressions while dealing with freezing temperatures and exhausted spirits. The famous opening helicopter shot remains a marvel of engineering, but it was also a moment of physical danger and extreme frustration for Julie Andrews. The cameraman was literally strapped to the side of a helicopter, flying low and close to her to capture the iconic spin. The sheer noise of the rotors made it impossible for her to hear any musical cues, so the production team had to employ a choreographer hidden nearby with a megaphone to signal her. Furthermore, the sheer force of the helicopter's downdraft repeatedly knocked her off her feet, dragging her through the grass and ruining take after take. Each time she fell, she had to stand up, shake off the dirt, and restart the sequence as if nothing had occurred. It was a repetitive, brutal process of forced resilience that required the actress to hide her physical exhaustion behind a mask of spontaneous, unbridled joy for the camera. The technical requirements of the filming often conflicted with the human reality of the actors, particularly during smaller, quieter moments. For example, the scene involving Liesl climbing into Maria's window was designed to be a romantic, lighthearted transition. However, it required the actress to be repeatedly drenched by a machine the crew called Mr. Rainstorm. Being soaked in cold water for 15 separate takes is a grueling experience that rarely makes it into the final edit. These moments highlight the disconnect between the final edited film and the reality of set life. We see the final product as an effortless, flowing story, but we fail to account for the mechanical, cold, and repetitive nature of the labor required to make it happen. The actors were not just performing. They were enduring a series of environmental and physical tests that demanded they stay in character, despite the uncomfortable and draining circumstances surrounding them. One of the most fascinating aspects of the film's production is the silent tension between the actors' desire for authenticity and the studio's demand for a polished commercial product. Julie Andrews wanted Maria to feel like a real person, not a saintly caricature, while Christopher Plummer wanted the captain to feel like a man of substance, not a romantic prop. This tug-of-war arguably saved the movie from being a bland, forgettable musical. By pushing back against the script's inherent sentimentality, the leads injected a necessary tension into their scenes that resonates with audiences even today. This behind-the-scenes conflict, while stressful at the time, is exactly why the film continues to hold up. It wasn't just a group of actors reading lines. It was a group of artists struggling to find the truth within a medium that often prioritized aesthetics over emotional reality. Their individual stubbornness was the catalyst for the film's lasting impact. The decision-making process during the shoot was characterized by a series of high-stakes compromises that the general public was never meant to see. Director Robert Wise had to constantly navigate these conflicts, balancing the artistic integrity of his leads with the logistical constraints of a massive multinational production. Every day brought new hurdles, from flooded roads in Austria to internal disagreements about character motivation. The director's role was less about artistic creation and more about crisis management. He had to keep the peace between a lead actress who feared the project was too sweet and a lead actor who feared it was too flat. The success of the film, therefore, is not a reflection of a smooth, easy production, but rather a reflection of the director's ability to weld these disparate, often conflicting visions into a cohesive, singular masterpiece. The fairy tale narrative that surrounds The Sound of Music is a carefully curated myth that obscures the grueling, unglamorous reality of the filmmaking process. If we examine the history of the production, we see a story about the resilience of the human spirit in the face of overwhelming corporate and technical pressure. The actors involved were professionals who understood that the ultimate goal was to entertain, even if that meant suppressing their own frustrations for the sake of the craft. This is the hallmark of truly great cinema, that the audience is never supposed to see the cracks. However, by peeling back these layers, we gain a deeper appreciation for the work. We see the effort, the doubt, the cold, and the exhaustion. We see the real people underneath the costumes, struggling to create beauty out of a chaotic, often uncooperative world. This is the true story of the production, and it is far more compelling than the film itself. As we continue to analyze the production, we must consider how the lack of modern technology influenced these challenges. Without the safety nets of digital post-production or complex CGI, every mistake had to be physically corrected on the set. If a lighting rig sputtered, the scene stopped. If the weather turned, the shoot was delayed. This reliance on analog processes meant that the margin for error was razor-thin. Every single take was an investment of time, money, and emotional labor. The stress levels on the crew must have been immense, given that a simple mechanical failure could effectively ruin a day's worth of work. It is in this high-pressure environment that we see the true character of the cast members who were forced to adapt and overcome, often in real time, to save the scenes they were building. The internal dynamic of the cast was complicated by the varying levels of experience among the actors. Julie Andrews was still navigating her first big film opportunities, while other cast members had varying backgrounds in theater or film. Balancing these different acting styles, from the theatrical flair of the stage to the subtle naturalism required for the cinema, was a monumental task for the director. The children in the cast added yet another layer of complexity, as they were prone to the natural realities of growing up, losing teeth, hitting growth spurts, and getting tired, all of which threatened to break the continuity of the film. Managing these human variables while simultaneously dealing with a difficult script and an even more difficult production environment is a feat that deserves far more recognition than it typically receives in standard film histories. Another layer of the production's difficulty involved the translation of the source material from stage to screen. The musical had already seen massive success on Broadway, and the film carried the burden of high expectations. There was an intense pressure to honor the original vision while also making the necessary adjustments for the cinematic medium. This transition was not always smooth. Changes were made to the song order, the packing, and even the character beats, which led to debates among the creative team. These arguments were not just about personal preference, they were about how to effectively translate the emotional power of a live performance into the more intimate, close-up reality of film. The tension of this transition is felt in the final product, but it was a battle fought in the editing room and during the long, arduous hours on set. Looking back at the film's reception, it is clear that the struggle paid off, but the cost of that success was not distributed equally. The studio executives likely viewed the film as a product to be managed, whereas the cast and crew viewed it as an artistic endeavor to be perfected. This fundamental difference in perspective is common in the industry, but it rarely produces results as iconic as The Sound of Music. The irony is that the elements the cast complained about, the excessive sentimentality, the rigid structure, are exactly what the audience embraced. The struggle between the filmmakers and their material resulted in a balanced, highly refined piece of entertainment that masks its own origins. It is a brilliant, if accidental, equilibrium achieved through conflict and compromise, a rare moment where the friction between creator and creation actually serves to elevate the final product. The legacy of The Sound of Music is often tied to the idea of perfection. We view the film as a standard of quality, a benchmark for what musicals can achieve. Yet this label of perfection is a dangerous one. It encourages us to ignore the humanity of the production, the mistakes, the fear, and the failures. When we strip away this myth, we find a story that is much more interesting. It is a story about the messy, human process of creation. It is about a group of people coming together under difficult conditions to produce something that would eventually touch millions of people. It is about the tension between the art we want to make and the reality we are given. This, ultimately, is the real story of the film, a human achievement born from a series of very human obstacles. The role of the script's reputation cannot be ignored when analyzing these challenges. Because the story was already so well known and loved by the public, the actors were under an immense burden to live up to preconceived notions. Julie Andrews, in particular, was conscious of the fact that her portrayal of Maria would be compared to those who came before her. This pressure to conform to a standard while also trying to inject a unique, authentic voice into the character created a psychological burden that few performers have to face. It was a struggle between being an icon and being an actor. The fact that she managed to balance both is a testament to her talent and her resilience. She took a character that could have been a cliché and turned her into one of the most beloved figures in cinematic history, largely because she was willing to ask the tough questions. The financial disparity mentioned earlier also serves as a poignant reminder of the era's industry practices. It is a stark contrast to today's environment, where star power often dictates significant back-end points and creative control. In the 1960s, the power dynamic was heavily skewed toward the studios, leaving artists with very little leverage. This reality meant that even in the most successful films, the actors were often treated as employees rather than stakeholders. This fact adds a layer of melancholy to the film's success for those who know the history. It highlights the vulnerability of the people who created this joy, reminding us that the production was a professional job, not a labor of love for everyone involved. The contrast between the joy on screen and the reality of the contract is perhaps the most defining paradox of the production. As we conclude this first part, it is essential to reflect on the nature of behind-the-scenes narratives. We often look for these stories to see how the sausage is made, so to speak, expecting to find scandal or incompetence. However, what we find here is something more profound. A glimpse into the tenacity required to make something truly great. The problems encountered were not the result of incompetence but of ambition. They were trying to do something difficult in a difficult location with a difficult script. That they succeeded at all is remarkable. The tension between their struggle and the final, serene result is what makes the film so enduring. It serves as a reminder that what we see on the screen is often just the tip of the iceberg, with a vast, invisible, and fascinating world of human effort hidden beneath the surface. Throughout the production, the cast and crew were also operating in a climate of shifting political and social norms which further complicated their work. While the film was meant to be an escape, the production itself was a product of its time, subject to all the biases and limitations of the mid-1960s. This is reflected in everything from the casting choices to the portrayal of the geopolitical tensions in the story. Every decision was a product of its environment, which is why it is so important to look at the film through a critical lens. It wasn't just a movie. It was a snapshot of a specific moment in history, capturing both the limitations of the era and the immense talent of those working within them. The challenges they faced were not just technical, they were also a reflection of the world in which they were trying to exist and work. Finally, we must consider the perspective of the audience. For decades, the public has been presented with a highly sanitized version of this film's creation. This is understandable. The mystery is part of the magic. However, by understanding the truth, we don't lose the magic, we gain a deeper respect for it. Knowing that the gazebo scene was filmed in silhouette to hide laughter caused by failing equipment doesn't make the scene less romantic, it makes it more human. It shows us that beauty can be constructed from broken pieces. It shows us that art is not about perfection but about the attempt to reach it, regardless of the obstacles in our way. This is the enduring lesson of The Sound of Music, and it is a story that deserves to be told with as much honesty and nuance as the performances themselves. The transition from outdoor location shooting to the controlled environment of the studio was supposed to bring relief to the production, but instead, it introduced a new set of logistical nightmares that tested the patience of everyone involved. While the outdoor scenes in Austria were hampered by weather and terrain, the studio scenes were hampered by the limitations of the technology itself. The most notable example of this was the gazebo scene, which stands as a central moment of romance and intimacy in the film. On paper, it was a straightforward dialogue between Maria and the captain, but in reality it became a disaster of acoustic and mechanical failure. The massive arc lights required for the lighting design emitted a constant, low-frequency sputtering noise that disrupted the actors' ability to maintain their concentration. Every time the camera rolled, the equipment would hum or spark, turning what should have been a tender, whispered confession into a frustrating exercise in repetition. The directors and the crew were forced to deal with the fact that these lights were absolutely necessary for the desired aesthetic. The romantic soft-focus look of the scene was a key part of the vision, and they could not simply replace the lights without compromising the visual quality of the film. Consequently, they were stuck in a cycle of failed takes, laughing, resetting, and trying again. The laughter was a coping mechanism, a way to deal with the sheer absurdity of the situation. Imagine the frustration. One of the most famous romantic scenes in history was nearly falling apart because of a piece of outdated, noisy lighting equipment. It is a perfect example of how the perfection we see on screen is often a mask covering up the very real, often ridiculous, problems that occurred during the production process, problems that were, for decades, kept hidden from the public eye. To resolve this issue, the director had to make a bold, creative choice. He decided to film the scene in silhouette. By backlighting the actors, he could obscure their expressions, which allowed them to act without the worry of having to perfectly sync their mouths or maintain a serious look if they were struggling to contain their amusement. This decision, born entirely out of frustration and the need to circumvent technical failure, became one of the most iconic visual choices in the film. Audiences have spent decades praising the dreamlike and atmospheric quality of that silhouette, never realizing that it was a tactical maneuver used to save a scene that had been effectively ruined by the lighting department. It is a brilliant example of how necessity is often the mother of invention in the film industry, turning a potential disaster into an artistic triumph. The dangers on set were not limited to technical malfunctions, there were also moments of genuine physical risk. The lake scene where Maria and the children fall out of the boat was a sequence that required precision and careful coordination. However, the plan went awry during the filming, leading to a situation that was far more dangerous than anyone had intended. Julie Andrews, who was supposed to fall forward to ensure she could reach the child actress playing Gretel, instead fell backward. This simple error in execution left the young girl who could not swim struggling in the water. The panic on the faces of the crew members who rushed to intervene was real, not staged. For a few terrifying seconds, the production was no longer about cameras and scripts, but about the immediate, life-saving necessity of keeping a child safe. These moments of real danger serve as a sobering reminder of the stakes involved in making such a complex, large-scale production. The audience sees a playful, lighthearted scene, but they are witnessing a performance that was, in reality, a near tragedy. It highlights the immense responsibility that falls on the shoulders of the director and the stunt coordinators to ensure the safety of their cast, especially when working with children. The fact that the crew was able to react quickly and pull the child to safety meant that the incident did not end in disaster, but the memory of the panic remained with those who were there. It is a testament to the professionalism of the cast that they were able to collect themselves and continue filming, ultimately producing the scene that we all recognize today. The incident with the window in the gazebo sequence is another example of how unpredictable the physical environment could be. The actress playing Liesel, during one of the dance sequences, ran through a glass window that was supposed to have been properly staged. The resulting injury was not planned, nor was it part of the script. Yet the production was already nearing its final stages, and there was no time to pause for a significant recovery period. The team had to manage the injury immediately with bandages and creative makeup to ensure the filming could continue. This level of dedication, while arguably pushing the limits of what should be expected of a performer, speaks to the intense pressure that the production was under. They were operating on a deadline, and every day of delay meant more costs and more complications. The continuous physical changes of the child actors throughout the months of production also presented a constant challenge to the continuity of the film. As the children grew, their heights changed, their voices deepened, and some even lost teeth. Each of these developmental milestones required adjustments in staging, camera angles, and wardrobe. A child who was tall enough for one shot might be too tall for the next, requiring the director to rethink how they were framed in relation to their counterparts. This is a level of detail that the audience rarely considers, but it was a logistical burden that the crew had to manage on a daily basis. Maintaining a consistent, cohesive film when your cast is literally growing up before your eyes is a task that requires an incredible amount of precision and flexibility. The pressure to maintain these details was not just about continuity, it was also about the budget. The studio had already invested a significant amount of money in the project, and they were constantly looking for ways to keep costs down. Every day of delay was a potential hit to the budget, which meant that the cast and crew were under immense pressure to get every shot right the first time. This pressure is why incidents like the gazebo light noise or the child falling into the lake felt so catastrophic. When you are under such intense scrutiny, every minor failure feels like a disaster. The resilience of the cast and crew who managed to navigate these hurdles without letting them destroy the project is truly impressive when viewed in this context. One of the most interesting aspects of these challenges is how they shape the final performance of the actors. The frustration of dealing with a broken boat or a malfunctioning light setup often translated into a certain level of intensity or urgency in the performances. In some cases, the actors were so tired or so annoyed by the delays that they dropped their guard, leading to moments of genuine, raw emotion that might not have been captured otherwise. The famous silhouette scene, for example, feels more intimate because of the constraints the actors were working under. They were not just playing characters in love, they were two people, physically close in the dark, trying to hold it together. That underlying tension is palpable, even if the audience doesn't know the exact reason for it. The role of the production's location in Salzburg cannot be overstated in terms of its impact on the daily routine of the crew. Salzburg is a beautiful city, but it was not designed to accommodate the needs of a massive multinational film production. The infrastructure from the roads to the power grid was constantly pushed to its limits. The crew had to rely on local support to navigate these difficulties, creating a complex web of relationships that extended far beyond the set. They were guests in a foreign country, working in a language and culture that was often different from their own. This added another layer of complexity to an already difficult project. They had to be diplomatic, adaptable, and respectful, all while trying to maintain the pace required to stay on schedule. The logistical challenges of moving gear and personnel were in many ways more difficult than the artistic ones. Transporting cameras, lights, and cables up and down mountainsides in inclement weather was a task that required an almost military level of precision. The use of ox carts, as mentioned previously, is a perfect symbol of the clash between modern technology and the reality of the environment. The crew had to be creative, resourceful, and patient, often doing things the hard way simply because there was no other option. This kind of work isn't captured on screen, but it is the foundation upon which the film's beauty was built. Without the hard work of these unsung heroes, the grips, the gaffers, the local helpers, the film simply wouldn't exist. The creative disagreements between Robert Wise and the actors were not just about the script. They were also about the interpretation of the music. Each actor had their own vision of how the songs should be delivered, which often clashed with the director's desire for a specific melodic and accessible sound. The songs and the sound of music are so iconic that it is easy to forget they were being recorded and performed by people who were at times exhausted and discouraged. The vocal performances were not just about hitting the notes, they were about carrying the emotional arc of the character through the music. This required a level of focus and concentration that was incredibly difficult to maintain given the, at times, chaotic nature of the set. The impact of the film's success on the actors was perhaps the most unexpected outcome of the entire project. None of them could have anticipated the sheer scale of the phenomenon that the sound of music would become. For some, it was a career-defining moment that brought them fame and fortune. For others, it was a project they were happy to leave behind. The varying ways in which the cast handled this success is a story in itself. Some embraced the fame while others felt burdened by it, constantly trying to escape the shadow of the characters they had played. This highlights the double-edged sword of stardom. The film gave them a place in history, but it also took away a piece of their identity, forever linking them to the roles they had played on that Austrian hillside. It is also important to remember that the actors were not just colleagues, they were people with lives and families outside of the film. The long periods of time spent on location away from home created a sense of isolation that only added to the pressure. They were living in a bubble, surrounded by the same people, the same problems, and the same script for months on end. This kind of environment can lead to both deep bonds and deep frictions. The relationships between the cast members shifted constantly, influenced by the successes and failures of the day. It was a complex, social and emotional ecosystem that was constantly changing, much like the film itself. The role of the studio in all of this is often vilified, but it is important to acknowledge their role in the film's success. Without the studio's resources, expertise, and willingness to take risks, the film would never have been made. They provided the framework, the budget, and the infrastructure that allowed these talented individuals to come together. While their management of the actors' contracts and their focus on the bottom line might be criticized today, they were operating within the established norms of their time. They were in the business of making movies, and they expected those movies to be successful. That they were able to foster such a monumental project despite the many challenges is something that should not be overlooked. The technical brilliance of the film's editors also deserves credit. They were the ones who had to take the fragmented, often imperfect takes and weave them into the smooth, polished narrative that we see today. They were the ones who had to manage the continuity errors, the lighting issues, and the sound problems, often using a combination of clever cutting and post-production techniques. They were the invisible architects of the film's success, creating the illusion of perfection by carefully hiding the cracks in the foundation. Their work is a testament to the idea that film is not just about what is captured on camera, but about what is done in the dark, quiet hours of the editing room. Looking back at the film's legacy, it is clear that its success is not just about the music or the story, but about the resilience of the people who created it. It is a story about the intersection of art and commerce, of dreamers and pragmatists, of visionaries and mechanics. It is a snapshot of an era when movies were made with a different level of physical and logistical effort. The challenges were, in many ways, a product of their time, but the response to those challenges, the grit, the creativity, and the dedication, is timeless. That is why we are still talking about this film today. It is more than just a musical, it is a monument to human effort. As we reach the end of this second part, we must acknowledge the complexity of the narrative. It is not just about how the movie was made, but about why it remains such a powerful piece of cultural history. The obstacles they faced were not just problems to be solved, they were part of the story of the film's creation. Every near miss, every delay, every disagreement contributed to the final product. It is a reminder that beauty is often found in the most unlikely places, and that the greatest triumphs are often those that seemed at the time to be doomed from the start. That is the essence of the filmmaking process, and it is a lesson that every storyteller should take to heart. The role of the audience in this story is also vital. By embracing the film, the public validated the efforts of the cast and crew, turning their hard work into something that transcended the screen. The joy that the film has brought to millions of people is a testament to the fact that regardless of the chaos behind the scenes, the end result was something that truly mattered. This is the ultimate goal of any artist, to touch people, to make them feel, to give them a moment of escape. The fact that The Sound of Music succeeded in doing this despite the many problems that occurred during its production is something that should be celebrated not just for the film itself, but for the human spirit that made it possible. Finally, we must reflect on the importance of these kinds of analytical, documentary-style deep dives. By understanding the complexity behind our favorite stories, we gain a deeper appreciation for the work that goes into them. We see the human beings behind the characters, the sweat behind the shimmer, and the struggle behind the song. This is what makes cinema so powerful. It allows us to look beyond the surface and into the depths of human creativity. The story of The Sound of Music is a perfect example of this, a reminder that the path to greatness is rarely straight, and that the best stories are often the ones that are the most difficult to tell. The long-term impact of The Sound of Music is undeniable, yet the story behind its production remains one of the most compelling narratives in Hollywood history. We have seen how the film was shaped by creative friction, environmental challenges, and technical failures that forced the cast and crew to adapt in ways that were never truly meant to be revealed to the public. As we consider the lasting legacy of the film, we must also think about the people who made it. How did this experience change them? How did the immense pressure of such a massive, chaotic production affect their careers and their personal lives? For some, the answer is found in the joy that the film brought to the world. For others, it is a more complex mix of pride, exhaustion, and a sense of having been part of something much larger than themselves. The way in which the actors spoke about their experience in later years provides a fascinating look into the evolution of their perspectives. Decades later, when the studio's grip on the narrative had loosened, people like Julie Andrews began to speak more openly about the struggles they had faced. These retrospective interviews provide a vital corrective to the myth of perfection, offering a more nuanced and honest account of what it was really like to be on that set. They show us that the cast was not just a collection of puppets following the director's orders, but a group of thinking, feeling individuals who were constantly processing the reality of their work. This is the kind of honesty that is so refreshing and necessary in our modern, highly curated media environment. The contrast between the film's reception in 1965 and its status today is another key point of analysis. When it was first released, the film was a massive hit, but it was also subject to criticism from those who felt it was too sentimental or too detached from the political realities of the time. Over the years, however, these critiques have largely faded, replaced by an appreciation for the film's craftsmanship and the sheer, infectious joy of its music. This evolution in perspective is a sign of a true classic, the ability to grow and change as the culture around it does. It reminds us that art is not a static object but a living, breathing thing that continues to evolve long after the final take is finished. One of the most interesting aspects of the film's legacy is the way it has been adopted and adapted by different generations. From school plays to community theater to late-night sing-alongs, The Sound of Music has become a part of our cultural fabric, a touchstone that connects us across time and space. The challenges that the cast faced, the rain, the noise, the mechanical failures, are now part of the film's lore, a trivia-rich history that fans love to explore. By knowing the truth about the production, we are not diminishing the magic, we are expanding it. We are seeing how the sausage was made, and we are finding that the effort was just as inspiring as the outcome. The role of the director, Robert Wise, in this entire process cannot be understated. He was the one who had to mediate the conflicts, manage the budget, and make the difficult decisions that saved the film from itself. His ability to balance the competing visions of the actors with the technical requirements of the production is a masterclass in leadership. He didn't just direct a musical, he orchestrated a project that was, at times, falling apart at the seams. His legacy, as a result, is one of quiet competence and artistic vision. He is a reminder that the best leaders are often the ones who can maintain their composure when everything else is in chaos, and that is a lesson that is just as valuable today as it was in 1965. The technical aspects of the film also deserve a final note of appreciation. The cinematography, the sound design, the editing, and the costume design all contributed to a final product that looks and sounds as vibrant today as it did decades ago. The fact that the film was able to overcome so many practical hurdles to achieve this level of quality is a tribute to the team of technicians who worked behind the scenes. They were the ones who made the magic happen, often without any of the recognition that the stars received. Their work is a reminder that cinema is a collaborative endeavor, and that the success of a film is a result of hundreds of people working together toward a common goal. As we reflect on the film's place in history, we should also consider the broader implications of these kinds of stories. What do they tell us about the nature of work, the importance of collaboration, and the struggle to create something that lasts? They tell us that greatness is not an accident. It is the result of intention, grit, and the ability to adapt. They tell us that the process of creation is often as beautiful and as difficult as the thing being created. They remind us that the people who make our favorite stories are, ultimately, human, and that their struggles and their successes are a reflection of our own. That is why we are so drawn to these stories. They allow us to see ourselves in the process of creation. The way in which The Sound of Music has remained relevant is a testament to the quality of the storytelling. Despite the behind-the-scenes chaos, the story itself is strong. It deals with universal themes: love, family, the search for purpose, and the importance of holding onto one's humanity in a world that is becoming increasingly cold and rigid. These themes resonate just as deeply today as they did in the 1960s. The film may have been made in a very different world, but the story it tells is timeless. This is the mark of a true classic, and it is why we will be watching and analyzing this film for many years to come. Looking back at the production, it is easy to focus on the problems, but it is just as important to acknowledge the successes. The performances of the entire cast, from the leads to the children, are uniformly excellent. They brought a sense of wonder and warmth to the characters that made the story feel real, even when the production was at its most chaotic. They were the ones who made the audience believe in the magic of the music, and they were the ones who made the story resonate. Their work is the heart of the film, and it is what has kept it alive for all these years. It is a credit to their talent and their resilience that they were able to rise above the chaos of the set and deliver such an enduring performance. The role of the music, of course, is the final piece of the puzzle. The songs in The Sound of Music are some of the most famous in the world, and they play a massive part in the film's lasting success. The way they are woven into the story, the way they reflect the characters' emotions, and the way they provide a sense of hope and joy is what makes the film so memorable. It is easy to forget that these songs were being recorded and performed by people who were at times exhausted and discouraged. The fact that they were able to deliver such high-quality performances is a testament to their professionalism and their passion for the music. As we conclude this documentary-style analysis, we should reflect on the nature of the questions we ask about our favorite films. Are we looking for scandal? Are we looking for ways to diminish the accomplishment? Or are we looking for something deeper? I believe that the desire to know the truth behind the camera is a natural part of being a fan. We love the story and we want to know everything about it. We want to know how it was made, who made it, and what they went through to make it happen. This curiosity is a sign of our connection to the art, and it is a way of honoring the people who created it. By seeking the truth, we are not breaking the spell, we are strengthening it. The story of The Sound of Music is a reminder that we are all, in our own way, striving to create something that lasts. We are all trying to navigate our own versions of the challenges that the cast and crew faced. We are all dealing with our own versions of the weather, the equipment failure, and the creative friction. And in that, we can find a sense of connection. The film is more than just a musical, it is a shared experience, a story that brings us together and reminds us of the power of the human spirit. That is why it is so important to keep telling these stories and to keep looking for the truth behind the screen. Looking back, we can see how the production was a mirror of the world at the time. It was a product of its era, reflecting the values, the limitations, and the aspirations of the mid-1960s. By analyzing the film, we are also analyzing the period in which it was made. We are looking at how people thought about music, family, and art, and how they responded to the challenges of their time. This is what makes film such a powerful medium. It allows us to look back at the past and see it through the eyes of those who lived it. It is a portal into another time and a way for us to connect with the people who built the foundation of our modern culture. One of the most important takeaways from this story is the power of resilience. The cast and crew were faced with one challenge after another, and yet they didn't quit. They kept going day after day, take after take. They found ways to work around the problems, to turn the failures into successes, and to keep the show going. This kind of resilience is what defines the best of the industry. It is the ability to keep your head down and get the work done, no matter what happens around you. It is the core of any successful creative project, and it is a lesson that is worth remembering in every aspect of our lives. The role of the audience in the film's enduring success also cannot be ignored. By continuing to watch, share, and discuss the film, the public has kept the story alive. The film belongs to the fans as much as it does to the people who made it. It is a shared treasure, a piece of our collective history that continues to bring joy to millions of people. This connection is what makes the film so special, and it is why we will always have a place for it in our hearts. It is a reminder that the best art is the kind that stays with us, that becomes a part of who we are, and that continues to inspire us throughout our lives. As we reach the end of our analysis, we must consider the final impact of the film on our culture. It has become a standard, a benchmark, and a classic. But it has also become something more. It has become a symbol of what is possible when people come together to create something great. It is a reminder that the path to success is often paved with failure, and that the greatest triumphs are the ones that were the most difficult to achieve. That is the true story of The Sound of Music, and it is a story that will continue to inspire and delight audiences for many generations to come. The technical and artistic challenges of the production are a testament to the dedication of the entire crew. From the writers to the actors, from the directors to the editors, everyone played a part in creating this masterpiece. Their work is a reminder that every film is a miracle, a collection of thousands of small, difficult decisions that miraculously come together to create something beautiful. It is a testament to the power of the medium and the passion of the people who work in it. The story of The Sound of Music is a story of human triumph, and it is a story that will always be worth telling. As we think about the future of film, we should keep these lessons in mind. We should remember that the process is just as important as the product, and that the struggles we face are often the key to our success. We should celebrate the resilience of the creators, the dedication of the cast, and the power of the medium itself. We should continue to look beyond the surface, to seek the truth, and to appreciate the hard work that goes into every piece of art we enjoy. That is the way to keep the magic alive, and it is the way to ensure that we continue to produce work that inspires and delights audiences for years to come. Finally, we should express our gratitude to the people who made this film possible. To the cast and crew who endured the cold, the rain, the long hours, and the endless challenges, we say thank you. Thank you for your hard work, your dedication, and your passion. Thank you for giving us a story that has touched our hearts and brought so much joy into our lives. You have created something that will outlive all of us, something that will continue to bring light and music to the world for as long as people are around to listen. And that is the greatest legacy anyone could hope for. In reflection, the story of The Sound of Music is one of the most remarkable tales in the history of cinema. It is a story of conflict, of challenge, of resilience, and of success. It is a story about the messy, human reality of making a movie and the beautiful, enduring result that it can produce. It is a story that will always have a place in our hearts, A story that will continue to remind us of the power of the human spirit, and a story that will always be worth telling again and again with all the nuance, honesty, and appreciation it deserves.